We are happy to announce that this episode of the SWW show is partially brought to you by Humble Bundle. Well, not really. We are part of the Humble Bundle referral program, and we just wanted to say that if you like really cheap games and maybe helping charity pending the Humble thing going on, all you have to do is go to humblebundle.com/partner equals SWW. That's right, humblebundle.com/partner equals SWW. And you just do your normal stuff, and it just kind of helps us get a couple bucks here and there. Maybe it helps AJ get his lights, maybe it's Mike camera, maybe we actually pay Corey for helping us out. But again, if you're going to go buy games anyway, it might be worth checking out.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to one of these interview episodes of the SWW show. I'm Mike, and today with me a special guest to talk about what I'm convinced is our first piece of hardware on the show. To get us started, do you mind introducing yourself and the piece of technology we're here to talk about today?
Yeah, sure. Hey, I'm John Warren. I am the co-founder and chief marketing officer of GLYDR, GLYDR. And yeah, GLYDR is a foot-based controller for video games, VR, and pretty much anything else you want to do in your digital world. We just had a Kickstarter that was successful, and we're getting ready to manufacture and ship our first batch to backers later this year.
Wow, no, that sounds great. So obviously, as I've heard you kind of talk about in other podcasts before and stuff, I don't want you to dig through the whole history. We don't want to kind of.
That's
I just
okay.
want to kind of talk about kind of a bit like what kind of how did you kind of get joined on the team kind of and like what did it kind of look like compared to what people see now?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So Rick, one of my co-founders, he is an engineer by trade, was a software engineer for a very long time. And 4.5, almost 5 years ago, he entered into a contest to help solve virtual reality locomotion issues. In terms of just kind of having more contest, I think, was kind of framed to be like, okay, we have not solved this issue. Obviously, the ideal is to have this big open space and move around freely, but one, not everybody can do that, and two, not everybody has that kind of space if they want to do VR. Anyway, he had seen his nephew riding around on one of those two, like those bipedal hoverboards,
Which
and
I just want to point out, I always like to. I don't know if you have the same opinion. Were we all sad as a society when we found out that's what we're gonna call that's called a hoverboard?
yeah, for sure. I mean, it's such a letdown, right? When an anticlimax. I mean, we many of us grew up watching, Back to the Future, and we have an idea of what a hoverboard is, and that's not it.
It's a
I
skateboard with
get,
a motor. Like
yeah, I get. What's a Segway without a handle? It's like it's just there's so many shortcuts that we could have used for it. And hoverboard was a disappointing one. So I totally agree. But he saw that and he was like, why doesn't this exist in the digital world? This kind of fairly intuitive forward, backward, turning a movement for feet. And so he applied it to virtual reality. I think he won that contest and kind of kept iterating on it. And asked me about it 3+ years ago. I was working for a Tencent subsidiary on the media side of the games industry. And I couldn't really get involved, but I also kind of thought this had already probably been made and existed. And so I was like, well, yeah, I don't know. But when I lost that job, he reached back out and kind of asked me to look into it deeper because he had had many years of kind of iterating on the device. He had made ones that were basically dual analog joysticks for your feet. He had made ones that were like kind of more like the Wii balance board with like shifting your weight and standing on them. And he ultimately came back to this original iteration of it, which is bipedal. You're seated, you can move back, forward, roll your feet out, create additional motion. And I started looking into it, and it was not something that was really available on the market. I mean, we had car pedals, we had rudder pedals for flight simulators, And we had these kind of single click devices to switch like scenes in streaming and stuff like that, but nothing that was analog and nothing that really covered a lot of ground at once and was super versatile. So I got really excited, jumped on board. We've been working on that, I think, officially for over a year. I think my 1 year anniversary is at the end of February. So that's been amazing, and we're just trying to get this thing to market, which is, a ton of work.
Yeah, I can only imagine of like, so I've shipped a bunch of like software products. I've never had the joy of shipping a hardware product, and I just feel like there's
Same.
so many extra moving pieces that seem extra stressful than just shipping software.
Yeah, so I've shipped 4 games in my career. I got started on the game dev side before I went to media. And so I guess I've just decided to speed run the entirety of the games industry in my career, doing software, then media, and now hardware. And you're right. Like, it is not only extra moving parts, but there is something really like fundamental and tactile and kind of really emotional about having a physical object that you're shipping out into the world. It is different. I mean, it's not better, but it is different. Software products that I've shipped have a very special place in my heart, and they live a very different life. But hardware is such a bizarre, unique thing, and learning the ins and outs of that has just been super rewarding, but also very difficult.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a lot of it. What I want to jump into is obviously you said this is a peripheral device that really focuses on kind of you could use your feet then and basically an input device. So you have a bunch of kind of
Yes.
movement kind of functionalities for it. What I'm kind of curious is from like a onboarding, and I know you guys probably organize kind of like an onboarding kind of point of view is like if as someone who gets it and plugs in kind of what that looks like, and then the other end is it are you guys talking about hooking up any sort of like developers can kind of auto create anything with this kind of on their end like profiles?
Yeah. So I think, yeah. So kind of tackling the first part first is, when you get the device, you're going to plug it in either USB or Bluetooth, and right now it is most tested and configurable on a desktop. By the time this gets to people, our configurator, which is basically a piece of software that you'll be able to open and build these profiles, submit a profile, activate a profile, change your dead zones, things like that. Like you, it's a very intuitive, like easy to do thing, but right now it's best to do on desktop. By the time it gets to you, that configurator will be able to you'll be able to use it on your mobile devices to set it up for consoles, things like that. So it's a very intuitive thing. I think right now, if you're using the the built-in configurator that we've had kind of as a debug device, it's like it's easy for people who've like set something up like an emulator before, but we definitely have work to do between now and the end of the year on the software kind of UX perspective, because I think unless you're used to that, it's a little bit tricky to get it set up. But that's one of those things that we're working very hard on to basically overhaul between now and then. Um, and it's pretty easy. Like, so you just pick a profile that we already have built for you, and it's going to ship with a lot of those, as well as a browser based way to load more profiles onto your device. But on the flip side, you can also build whatever you want to. You can build your own profiles, you can build your own sensitivities, things like that. So that's that. In terms of developers being able to kind of build their own profiles and things like that, absolutely. We're in the early stages of working with a couple of developers who are developing with this device in mind. I mean, not necessarily from the ground up, but from the perspective of they see utility with the device that would speak to that game's specific audience, and they want to be thinking about it ahead of time and helping build out those kind of profiles. So we definitely expect a lot of developers and publishers, if they're excited about this device, to get one and start to publish their own bespoke profiles that are ready to go. But even if they don't, there are going to be a lot of gamers out there that just build their own, and they'll be able to share those, and that's kind of how we see that unfolding.
No, that sounds great. So I'm kind of curious. So just to give you a little context here. So my background is like I kind of start from games, and I've done a bunch of like simulation-y or like kind of working with other clients using game technology. So I'm always curious, kind of, do you guys have any mind or have thought of kind of, because obviously this is a device that's built for gamers first, but obviously anyone with a PC in theory could use it. I'm kind of curious if you guys have any thought of like use cases that would be of that more either simulation environment or just people who just want to kind of use their PC, and this is an easier way to get around it too.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. So it at the end of the day, Glider really is an extension of your keyboard and mouse. It can basically establish inputs that really just kind of spawn directly from inputs that would be used every day, regardless of what you're doing, whether you're playing games, whether you're doing VR, whether you're working, whether you're um, just doing hobby work, that kind of thing. So we had started to experiment with other uses of this, at least a year ago. But I've scrubbed video with my feet as I edit, and I start to mark stuff up with my hands. Um, Doing some design work in Photoshop, I've like used the foot device to basically increase brush sizes as I move around with my hands. So there's this kind of like intuitive, more tactile, and uh kind of, I don't know, easier way, frankly, to do some of the fundamental things that I already do on my desktop. We've had users come to us to talk about how they envision spreadsheeting being different, totally different once they have this device. They talk about doing live DJ sets on Twitch, which involves an entire different suite of software that we don't
That's
really, you know,
interesting. The DJ set one I
yeah,
think is very interesting because I'm curious if you could do like what people do with a lot of times with the record stuff, kind of almost with using the device.
yeah. So we have not encountered many use cases that have been floated to us that would not work, because really anything that you can basically create an input for in your desktop, Glider can be configured for. So it's like that is kind of one of those things that's like, it feels like kind of magic. I mean, we really are making this primarily with gaming in mind, but the more people who hear about it or get to try it out, they start talking about all the different ways that they want to take it from their games to music production or video editing or DJ sets and stuff like that. And we think that's awesome. We definitely don't want to discourage that at all.
No, and I do that because like VR to me is a perfect example of a thing that we have seen that like gamers obviously like, and we've seen great games from them. But it's also very interesting because obviously that's technology. I actually think you really things shine more in like education spaces or medical spaces, and that's kind of where I had similar thoughts of your product too. I'm curious, kind of if we'll start seeing it in those or like pop-up museums or kind of those type of exhibits, kind of give it that unique
Yeah.
like little twist.
Yeah, I love the idea of having kind of this like you're just moving in 3D space in some sort of educational space. You're not using your hands. You're actually just kind of paying attention to what's around. Um, yeah, there are plenty of uses for education, for medical that have come up for us, for telerobotics. There are a lot of different um, things that have been floated to us. I mean, we can't do all of these things at once. We can't focus our energy on all of them at once. So we're kind of trying to tackle consumer hardware needs first, but we're definitely interested in branching out into different categories as well as this expands.
No, no, that sounds great. Kind of jumping back to that, if you don't mind. I know we kind of touched on
Yeah.
it before, but I'm very curious, kind of as we said, both of us kind of come from a background of like we've shipped software before, and
Yeah.
and you're kind of experiencing the shipping of hardware. If you don't mind, kind of talking a bit more, kind of like what is that process like, kind of from a like, you guys probably have to do a bunch of like prototyping and then proving
Yeah.
packaging. Like how much, like what does that kind of look like logistically, especially like a product this where you guys are like obviously custom making a product versus like something that's a little more like a notch off a shelf that you're kind of packaging up.
Yeah, so I was really, really, really fortunate to join this team after Rick had essentially done all the iterating, which is amazing. But having kind of been walked through that process and seen it from his perspective and him walking through all the different iterations, it is a really complex process of taking what started as a wood and metal prototype to basically show a proof of concept, and then to literally, hot gluing one of those physical hoverboards onto a piece of wood, and kind of showing again a separate iteration of like, okay, maybe you're not seeing it, but conceptually this is kind of what I'm going for. And then going from there, and then just kind of 3D printing the parts, putting stuff together, going through the software layer, just creating all those connections to a PC desktop, and then to other devices as well. Getting the Bluetooth set up. All of these were iterations that took many weeks, sometimes months, to figure out, perfect, get all the parts right, 3D print the parts, maybe order some order 500 small chips in from China to basically put into all these bespoke prototypes that are around. And it took that long to basically get to where we are now, about 3.5 years, where we have, I want to say, 17 what we would call final stage prototypes before it goes off to the manufacturer. These prototypes work pretty much exactly like our consumers will get them. There will not be many surprises. There might be some onboarding, quality of life improvements in terms of being able to switch things on and off of your foots, maybe switch between profiles directly on the board. That's not something that we have right now. So there are like small quality of life things that might change, but the overall how it works is basically set now. And there are 17 of those prototypes or so out in the wild. Some influencers are using them, all that stuff. So it is truly wild. The part of it that is very new to me, which is something that I always understood kind of in the back of my mind, being in the games industry and tech for a long time, but setting up the tooling, setting up, the machines that build the machines is part of this process. So going through a manufacturer, talking to them about how this works, having a design that is maximized and estimated so we can actually make financial projections far into the future about what kind of margins we're going to make on this device. Those are all conversations that take weeks, months, in some cases years to really perfect. And it's a really wild process, and I'm glad, selfishly, that I was able to join this team kind of after Rick had done a lot of this work. So really a lot of what I had been doing and part of what I've been privy to are these kind of late stage manufacturing conversations about what tooling we need to build, about what parts we need to have, and how we're maximizing our own margins while also providing the absolute best long lasting product for consumers.
So that's interesting. One of the pieces that you said there. So you said, so obviously, and that makes a lot of sense. You said like the tools for like building a machine are like a very important part of the
Yeah,
process. Are you saying like this was level of like we then had to go to manufacturers who like we then had to like help them acquire some tooling? Because like this is interesting because it's a device to me that like as a connection piece, obviously we talk about there's nothing like this quite on the market, but it's a
right.
lot of individual components seem like somewhat like not comedy, but like kind of things that obviously exist out there of like
Oh,
sensors or figuring out Arduinos and stuff like that.
for
That's what
sure.
makes sense
Yeah.
of that.
So I mean, we have patents on the device, but I will readily admit this is not a. Hey, what you doing? Sorry. Hey, buddy, come here.
There's
Sorry,
a
my
dog in
my
the
dog,
background of
my
John,
my
which is
my yeah. Sorry, my dog is trying to eat something right now that he shouldn't be eating. Hey, come here, come here. Sorry about this. Okay, there we go. I had to wrestle it out of his mouth.
that's
All
okay.
right, there we go. So yeah, like that's a really they are common parts. I mean, we have these patents on the device, but ultimately it is a fairly simple device. I mean, it works the way any sort of analog device really works on the market. There are some little unique things that we have that we're able to get that patent on, but at the same time, you're right. The components to actually build it are not super complicated. What's complicated is building it cheaply, because if we relatively cheaply, because if we 3D print all these products, it's going to be very expensive, and also those many of those materials are actually too rigid for what we need. So we need some higher quality materials to mix with the materials that will be very easy to replicate and mass produce. So the tooling conversation involves kind of looking at what our manufacturing partner has already built and seeing, excuse me, and seeing if there is a reuse situation for some of their machines, if they need to build something else, if they need to just tweak something else that is already kind of in their wheelhouse. So it's very interesting. We're not reinventing the wheel, although most manufacturers we spoke to over the past couple of years had not done something like this, had not done anything that was foot based. They had all been spending their time making, keyboards, mice, other peripherals that get a lot of clicks, but mostly with hands. So that's been an interesting part of the conversation for sure, is getting them to adjust their expectations about what they need to build this product.
Oh, no, that's very, very fascinating. Kind of jumping on as you said too. I was talking about this. There are some prototypes, obviously, in the wild, as you said, kind of either between streamers or obviously you guys kind of demoing them and testing them out and kind of using them.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of like stuff in there immediately that you're like, oh, we kind of have learned, like we're gonna tell people like, hey, you should use this for like a few hours at a time? Is there any like stuff like, so obviously it's very analog, but like it's blue, are there battery concerns, any of that type of stuff that you guys are like learning as you're going through this testing process?
No, I think the only thing that we're really one, you can't stand on it, so we kind of we kind of like keep reminding people of that.
I feel like you have to
Um
keep reminding people of that one. Like
yeah,
it makes total sense when you see it, but I feel like that's the one you have to keep reminding people.
no, we've pretty much resigned ourselves to putting a sticker on the top of it that says "Do not stand," which is ugly and annoying, and I think you'll be able to remove it, if you want. But we know that that's going to be something. Like even at events where we have a chair propped up right in front of it, people still try to do it, and we're like, no, no, no. Okay, so the context clues not really working. Okay, got it. So we have to do that. Definitely have to remind people of that. We usually have to walk. I would say we've had to walk like 80% of the people who've gotten it through the configuration process, just so they kind of understand, what they're doing. Some people who are especially especially disabled folks who have tried this out, who are used to having weird daisy chained configuration devices to basically get their stuff working the way that their setups will require, they're usually pretty used to it, so they don't have to be like walk through this, which is very, very funny. Um but a lot of folks typically have to be walked through that, so we know based on those conversations how the UX of our configurator and how you set up the device has to change. So that's been very, very useful. Um, the other part is like I would say really what's fascinating, which I guess I already knew from my days as a game dev, doing QA and watching people play games for the first time. um, People are not always naturally curious. They're not naturally inclined to experiment. They get overwhelmed by the idea of, okay, this thing can be used to do whatever. So have at it, figure it out. Like, what do you want to do with it? Some people really don't like that. So what we've had to do is basically come up with really key examples of games across many genres that have clear use cases. And then that starts to kind of fire off the synapses that a lot of people need to go, oh, all right. Oh, okay. And then they start to roll with it. It's really the minority of people that have already cooked up 10 different uses for this thing and are super excited to try it. But those people we love too, because they give us ideas on what we could use the device for. So yeah, the early testing process has shown us a lot, and we expect that to continue even through the summer, up until we ship, because we're getting a lot of really good data.
No, and that sounds great. I do want to jump in, as we said. Obviously, this is a device, as we've been talking about, that is kind of could be used for anyone. But obviously, I'd say that a lot of people, as you kind of mentioned too, of when you see it, you think of people with some form of like physical disability with either hands or certain movement type stuff. I'm kind of curious, especially if you guys been showing this off kind of in person. Has there ever have you seen kind of like as you hand it to people who maybe before had trouble experiencing stuff like those light bulb moments kind of go off?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have had people sit down and kind of try to use it, and they don't immediately understand the configuration. Like we've had basically 3D movement setups where we expect people to still use their hands to do certain things like shoot or open doors or interact, but move around with their feet. We definitely it sometimes it is an adjustment to get people to think about it differently. In terms of like I I the disability question, folks with disabilities pretty much get what we're doing right away, because they're used to having to kind of create a lot of setups for themselves. I mean, adaptive setups are getting more streamlined and more readily available, but they're still relatively expensive and they're still involving additional components. So, when we talk to folks with disabilities, they get it right away and they're excited to try it out. And that's really emboldening for us because we know that that audience is going to be really huge for us too. I don't know if that fully answered your question.
No,
If
no, it totally makes sense. I guess I was also kind of get at too, kind of if you had any kind of like, as you said, they get it right away. But I'm kind of curious if you've kind of had any experience or heard of stories of people have been like who had troubles kind of either playing game or playing experiences, and you kind of saw it like really kind of work for them. Like if you kind of needed those kind of moments.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I mean, we had a setup at a we had a setup at a in-person event in Dallas where we had Rocket League hooked up to the device, and the device was, I think the setup was the left foot would basically steer forward, backward, and we were basically saying like use just the thumbstick to move your camera and stuff like that. um and then the oh no, that wasn't the setup, that was a different setup. The setup that we were using at that place was basically left foot down is boosting and right foot down is jumping. And there was someone that was like, who'd played Rocket League before, and they were kind of struggling with that. They were a pro, they could do those crazy air maneuvers and air boost and really really interesting patterns to get at the ball, and they were having trouble with it. But when they realized that they just needed to shift their focus, they actually got a lot out of basically freeing up some of their fingers to not do those things and just focus on moving the camera. And then they got it right away. And then there was this kind of this light bulb moment of like, they went from feeling like they were totally out of control into feeling like they had complete control over their situation in about 5 minutes. And that's really exciting to see that happen because it is new. It is different. We're not saying that it's not going to be an adjustment for parts of the audience, but like when you get it, you can see it. And you can also see like it's really tough for us to say, oh, you're better at this because we just don't have a ton of longitudinal data to tell us that. But we can kind of see it with the eyeballs that like they feel comfortable using the device in a way that they feel excited by, and that's really exciting for us.
No, that sounds great. I gotta ask, kind of if you've been playing with this or experiencing it, is there any kind of games or experiences to you kind of that you feel like are really either fun or great showpieces that you've kind of enjoyed kind of messing with?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm kind of the in-house profile builder that will, get a new game and basically go in and play stuff. And it actually was an older game that I was like, okay, I was testing Tekken 8 and some other stuff, and I was like, I'm gonna play a couple rounds of Apex Legends. And I'm okay at Apex Legends, but I'm a controller user. I get really fatigued when I use WASD controls, for the most part, get really crampy. So I use controller. And, folks that use controller, they'll understand, when you're doing left click in on the left joystick, it's basically a toggle control. So you're basically sprinting on and off, and you've got to like essentially it's less nimble than a full analog movement, but that full analog movement is a little bit difficult to get with a controller, even with those back paddles on modern Elite controllers. So I moved crouching and sprinting to the device, to GLYDR, and immediately became much more nimble than I'd ever been playing this game before, because I was able to do a lot more movement tech, a lot of sliding, a lot of sprint sliding, a lot of really interesting moves that allowed me to shoot around corners while moving, because I was able to focus more heavily on my hands doing aiming and shooting than also doing those other movements. And it does create this sense of like, some people, especially with disabilities in their lower body, they're used to driving a car with hand controls, but you're doing so much with your hands. You're not only steering and controlling the radio and air conditioning and all that stuff, but you're doing acceleration and braking and all that stuff. Me, who can use my feet, that feels overwhelming to me. So I kind of apply that to digital spaces as well, where I'm like, okay, unless I'm really, really used to this, I can get more actions and more control by moving some stuff to my feet, because it just is a matter of mental focus. And it's kind of in the margins, and you don't maybe notice it until you've played a couple of rounds. But I am much better at this video game that I've played for a long time using my feet than I was without.
It's very interesting. It totally makes sense because like you're dividing almost the mental load too, because it's almost
Yeah.
like that division of like I both have to like do all this stuff, but I have to be like, okay, now I have to balance the time of this one hand or two hands, be able to do like 20 things. But now I can be like, oh, now I have an extra set of things, basically like divide this labor and probably mentally have to do less calculations of how fast I have to move and stuff.
100%. And I mean, like a really good example, going back into kind of modern stuff. Not that Apex isn't modern, but you know what I mean. Uh, is Armored Core 6 that came out last year. Ethan Gatch for Kotaku, his review, which I was so happy with. Like, I couldn't believe my luck reading this review. In the first paragraph, he goes, the DualSense controller is basically not built for a game this complex. And I was like, wow, you could not have written copy that I can use to other people better than that. So I should send him a bottle of champagne or something. But that's just such a great encapsulation that a lot of modern games do ask you to take a lot of action with just two hands. And it's actually an unreasonable ask. And I mean, we can talk about what from Software's design sensibility is, and like they probably want that to be a difficult situation for you, and that makes a lot of sense. It's kind of in the text of their design philosophy. But pulling that aside, when I moved a lot of those actions to my feet, it was a lot easier to get a handle on those early missions that felt a little frenetic and difficult to get my head around. And it lightened the load. So yeah, you're exactly right. It basically just splits the load, the mental load that video games require. And I think people just don't understand how important that is. We see it in other facets of our life, whether it's driving or playing instruments or using a sewing machine or whatever. We kind of take that stuff for granted, but like we don't apply it in the digital world because frankly, I don't think anyone has ever really posed it quite this way.
Yeah, I
So
don't.
yeah,
Yeah, because short of like I could obviously think of stuff like like the pedals and like Guitar Hero, some rock, but like otherwise I can't really think
sure.
of any things that like kind of tackle this, unless it's like a very nuanced like racing pedal type thing, like a very specific thing.
Yeah, and I mean we're very open to people taking this thing and using it for skateboard or driving games or guitar pedals. And someone got really excited about playing Time Crisis the right way, using which I was like, oh, totally, that's amazing. So there are all these kind of like obvious uses for it, and we're totally cool with that. But there's also like, no, apply it to everything. I mean, apply it to, I played Celeste with this thing. And it's like, it really is this kind of beautiful thing where if you're having trouble with something in a game, ask yourself if like mental load on your hands is part of the problem. And maybe this is the right device for you if if you answer yes to any game. And for me personally, there are actually a lot of games like that. And it's not that I don't have fun playing them, even if my mental load is too much, but I'm better at them when I use my feet, and I can usually play them for longer.
No, that makes perfect sense. Well, I don't want to have to keep you here all day, but I do want to kind of touch on. Obviously, you said that this game, this project was successfully started on Kickstarter,
Yeah.
and people can start expecting theirs you like later on this year. Is
Mhm.
there any sort of plan or kind of work on of like for people who did not back, kind of how they could acquire as if they want of this device?
Absolutely. So, as of, I mean, I'm assuming this will go up like relatively soon. So I'm gonna say by the time you're listening to this, we'll be pretty close to launching a pre-order interface on our website that'll allow you to basically put down a deposit. A little bit how Steam Deck worked. If you ever got a Steam Deck, Steam would basically say, "All right, put $5 down. We'll email you when you're able to basically order this," and that's how this is going to work. So you'll be able to um, put some money down. We think it's going to be $1 at the time of this conversation, to basically just hold your place in line. We'll email you. You'll be able to get it at a little bit of a retail discount, not quite as much as you were able to get on Kickstarter, but you'll be able to do that. We think you'll be able to start putting those deposits down in the spring, and those will probably ship out early next year. So that first batch of the Kickstarter backers, we're thinking late this year. We're saying October, and the folks that are able to put down a deposit and then pre-ordered it a little bit later this year, they'll get it at the beginning of 2025. So that's the plan at the moment, and we feel pretty confident about it. And we're excited to get pre-orders going for folks that maybe missed the campaign.
Perfect. Well, I want to say thank you again, John, for taking time to talk to me today. I'm very
Of
excited to
course.
see how this hardware kind of works, and I'm kind of excited to get mine in person. Uh, Before we send it off, then, is there any other spot we should be sending people? As we said, you guys do have the website at glider.gg, right?
Yeah, we have a website, GLYDR.gg. We're about to overhaul it. The best thing for folks to do, I think, is to go to feetlegal.com. That's FEETLEGAL.com. That's basically a shorthand for wherever we want you to go. For a while, it took you to the Kickstarter. It's going to take you eventually to that pre-order site. So feetlegal.com is a pretty safe bet to get you to wherever we want you to go at the moment. You can also follow us pretty much at every single social media account at GLYDR GG. So that's GLYDR GG. So yeah, you can find us in those places. We will have a way for you to join an email list very soon. That's probably going to be the best way. We also have a Discord as well. So if you go to feetlegal.com, you'll be able to find our Discord in a update post on our Kickstarter. So you can join that and kind of talk to other folks about how they're planning on using it. And it's very exciting. We're having a good time talking about how to play games with your feet in there.
Perfect. Well, again, John, thank you for joining me this early afternoon, late morning for us, and discussing Glider. This is very cool technology, and I'm excited for everyone to get a hands on it. So yeah, as everyone, at least go to feetlegal.com, go check it out, see if it interests you, and then keep an eye on those pre-orders or it opens up inventory space. Again, thank you for joining me, and best of luck as you guys are trying to run towards releasing this thing later this year.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time.
The SWW show and all of its affiliate podcasts are podcast by me, Mike Maroney, and AJ Losi, sometimes by our contributors, including Corey King. You can follow the SWW show on social media at the SWW show, or sooner or later you go to patreon.com/SWW to help us out. Thank you. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day.